The number 12 typically means perfection or authority, and the number 12 is often associated in the context of government. For instance, we see the 12 disciples. In Revelation, we read about the New Jerusalem. When we see the number 12 repeatedly, 12 gates, 12 angels, 12 foundations, what is all this saying? All of this is pointing to perfection, ultimately coming under God's authority and under God's government. Typically, when we see the number 12 in Scripture, it's associated in a positive context, okay? But not so much when we read about the woman with the issue of blood, am I right? She had this issue of blood for 12 years, and it wasn't a good thing, but we still see that this thing had authority and full government over her life. It dictated everything that she did in her life. Why do I say that? Because under the culture, under Jewish law, she would have been considered unclean. No one would have wanted to come into contact with her. She would have been ostracized. She would have been pushed to the side. She would have been looked down on. Here's the thing. This 12 certainly didn't mean perfection in her life in the sense that we think it should, but it did represent a perfect storm. We learn this, that what's impossible with man is possible with God. What's impossible with man is possible with God. This woman had an issue of blood for 12 years. That's a long time. It controlled her life, and we read that she literally spent everything she had on doctors. And instead of getting better, we read that it actually got worse. How many of you have said that, well, it can't get any worse, and then egg on your face because you realize, oh, it can get much worse? How many of you, maybe that's your 2020? I mean, like, it can always get worse, but let me tell you something, it can always get better too. This woman suffered a great deal under the hand of many doctors. She spent all she had, and yet, instead of getting better, she grew worse. But this is where everything changed. Verse 27, when she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and she touched his cloak. You know, sometimes our situations never get any better, and in fact, sometimes our situations get worse because we refuse to bring our problems to the feet of Jesus. I mean, we'll exhaust every other resource. We'll go down every other avenue. We'll do this. We'll exhaust everything else, but we refuse to bring our problem to the feet of Jesus. And many times I think that's why our problems are not resolved, and in fact, they end up getting worse. Insight number 3, faith takes hold of God's promises. Faith takes hold to the eternal truth of God's promises. Here is Jesus passing by. In fact, when we read the text right at the beginning, we read that Jesus wasn't even actually on his way to heal her. Do y'all recognize that? He was on his way to heal somebody else's little girl. How many of you have ever felt like everybody else is getting their miracle, and yet Jesus is passing you by? Jesus was actually passing this woman by on his way to perform another miracle. Isn't that a sad place to be in? It's like, God, I see this person getting their miracle. This person's getting there. The person right beside me just fell on the ground. Why aren't you touching me? Jesus, it seemed like he was passing her by, but this woman said, not today. Not today. I've tried everything else. I've exhausted every other resource. I've went down every other avenue. I don't have a choice. I'm going to touch Jesus today, and I'm going to be healed and made whole. Faith doesn't free us from the fight. Faith doesn't free us from the fight. I love this scene. Jesus is literally being crushed by people. Everybody's bumping into Jesus. I wonder how hard it was for this woman to get to Jesus. I wonder if she had to claw tooth and nail. I wonder if she had to push through people. I mean, it was worse than Black Friday trying to get a TV, okay, at half price. Like, she was having to fight her way through the crowds. And remember, she's the woman with the issue of blood. Everyone knows that she's unclean. So was she wearing a cloak? Did she have to get down on the ground on her hands and knees? Was she getting stepped on? Was she getting pummeled? I wonder if any point during this scenario, if she ever said to herself, man, maybe it's just not worth the pain. Man, maybe it's just not worth it to try to push through this crowd. But guess what? She pushed through it all. She got to Jesus. She made contact, and boom, a healing came. I want to tell you this morning that when you begin to believe and have faith for your miracle, that doesn't mean that the fight is over. That just means the fight of faith may just be beginning.